Hello, everybody. Good morning. It is morning right now for me. I'm in Argentina. It's 11:30, and my special guest today on the Profe Kyle Show is Virginia, and she is in Cartagena, Colombia at this moment. Virginia, good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. All right. So let me give a quick introduction to Virginia. So I met Virginia, I think, was last year. I know it was last year. I think it was July. Do you remember the exact month? Was it July or June?
I think it was around the summertime, so I think you're right. Around about there. Yes.
We'll say June for now.
Perfect.
And I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I have Instagram. Virginia has Instagram. And I don't know if I commented on something she did or she commented on something I did. And then I think we went back and forth a little bit. And then I think she realized that I was in Bogota and she realized, hey, I'm in Bogota too. And I can't remember who suggested it. I don't know if it was me or if it was you, but we said, hey, let's go get coffee or something. So we went and got coffee in June or July. I don't remember the month. And we sat down. We had a good conversation for a few hours. And Virginia's a nice, lovely lady. And it'll be interesting for you guys who are watching this because Virginia, she is, well, we need to get into this because it's a little bit confusing with Virginia. But she does speak British English. And I think she's British, but I'm still not quite too sure. So maybe we'll start with that. So Virginia, are you British or are you Dutch or are you both?
I'm English. I'm
You're
English.
English. Okay.
Yes, but I was born and raised in the Netherlands. So that's where the confusion often comes in. But my parents moved to the Netherlands for work. And so I was born there with my brothers and sisters. And we spent the first 18 years of our lives in the Netherlands.
That's a long time. And did you learn Dutch during that time? Because you were there for 18 years. Did you become bilingual or your parents were very English supremacists? They said, no, you guys will only be speaking English. You guys are going to English grammar school in the Netherlands, everything English.
Yes, yes, but I don't think they would say that they were English supremacists, but yes, along those lines, yes. So I went to a British school in the Netherlands. So it was interesting, but very unique upbringing in the sense that in some aspects, I had a very sort of idyllic childhood. We were living in a Dutch town outside of The Hague. I would cycle to school or take the bus to school, surrounded by countryside, cows, windmills, canals, very beautiful. We play field hockey, all those things that are sort of essentially Dutch, for lack of a better word, sort of what you think of as a typical Dutch upbringing. But the moment I stepped through the school gates, I was back in England. So the idea behind the school was almost as if you had picked up a school from the UK and dropped it in the Netherlands. So my teachers were, for the most part, from the UK as well. We learnt the UK school system. We sat UK exams. We even had a tuck shop where you could get sweets and sandwiches. A tuck shop is what in the UK is like a school shop where you would go and get treats and things like that.
Oh, really?
We wore a school uniform. We were one of the only schools in the whole country that had to wear a uniform because Dutch schools don't wear uniforms. So there were some things that made us stand out from the rest. But yes, it was almost like these two sides. You had sort of outside of school, very sort of lovely Dutch upbringing, and then inside of school was very British, very English.
Yeah, those Dutch stereotypes, you kind of touched on them. The Dutch are very famous for liking to cycle everywhere. Yes. So like you said, you were cycling to school every day. And actually something I learned, I met a Dutch guy. I'm in Buenos Aires right now. I met a Dutch guy a week ago. And yeah, he was telling me because in Argentina, the women here play field hockey. It's one of the most popular sports for women. And he was saying, yeah, when it comes to field hockey, usually it's the Netherlands and Argentina. Those are usually the top two teams for women's field hockey. Yes. So, and that was a sport that you played when you were a child, or is it something that you just saw other people playing?
No, I played it. I absolutely love field hockey. I played when I was in the Netherlands. I played also at university in the UK. It's one of the things I miss the most now that I live in Colombia. I haven't been able to find a field hockey team here. I don't think it's as popular, but I love that sport. It's a fantastic sport. And your friend's right. Argentina is one of the best. They have the best women's team. It's normally them, and the Netherlands, sometimes Belgium. They're always fighting for top spot.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny too. When I was in university, in my dormitory, there was one Dutch guy. And I didn't realize this till I met the other Dutch guy a week ago. But he was on a scholarship for my university, the University of British Columbia, for field hockey. So I didn't realize that the Dutch were so famous for field hockey until recently. And field hockey is kind of is it a rough sport? Like, because I'm Canadian, so we play hockey, and hockey is a very, very rough sport. I think I saw some memes, I think a few weeks ago, of women playing field hockey, and like the women with the bloody nose, and just like, no, don't take me off the field. Let me keep on playing. I'm ready to go. So it's a very rough sport for women, or is it not as bad as you might think if you're thinking of the typical Canadian hockey?
I wouldn't say it's comparable to ice hockey. I mean, I watch in awe. I'm amazed by ice hockey. I think it's incredible. It's so fast, so brutal. Technically, field hockey is a non-contact sport.
Okay.
Like football, but as anybody knows who watches a game of football, British football, not soccer. There's a little bit of elbowing and pushing and shoving, which is all part and parcel of the game. It's can't really play the sport without a little bit of contact. But technically it's not contact. But I would say it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for those who get fearful, because the ball does fly up, and it's a hard plastic ball.
Yes,
and it is, and I played in defense, and so there is something called a short corner, where I suppose it's a bit like a corner in football. So the ball starts in the corner, they hit it to the top of the D. The D is sort of, if you imagine the pitch, there's normally a semicircle of the goal. So they would hit the ball from the corner to the top of the D, and there would be a line of attackers there who would be ready to hit the ball into the goal. Sounds simple enough, except if you're a defender, you're standing on the goal line with the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper has a helmet and is padded. You don't. And you've still got to run out towards this. And so you've got this ball flying up, and if you get hit in the face or the body, you've got to take it and keep playing, if possible. Obviously, if you can, then you've got to keep going. But you can't you've got to use your stick there to sort of help you out. It shouldn't go above the shoulders, but you've got to, you can't be fearful of the ball coming at you, is what I mean to say. Yeah, it's a tough sport.
What's the worst injury you ever got from field hockey? Did you ever get any bad injuries?
No, nothing at all bad. I think at most, I'm very klutzy. I tend to fall over quite easily. So I probably twisted my ankle. I think that's probably the worst that's ever happened to me. Maybe a few bruises from falling over, but nothing that bad at all. I've seen teammates get hit, for example, in the face with the ball and have a black eye. But luckily, nothing like that's ever happened to me.
And in soccer, again, so soccer for me, football for you. And obviously most Latinos, they say football too. Actually, Latinos sometimes get mad when I say soccer. It's like, I'm Canadian.
Rightly so.
Soccer. Now in soccer, they wear shin guards. Do they also use that in field hockey? Shin guards?
Shin pads. We call them shin pads, but yes.
Yeah. I think we call them shin guards. I can't remember. Last time I played soccer was like 20 years ago when I was a little kid. But yeah, I think we call them shin guards. Okay. Yeah, because guessing you got those sticks, flying around. You want to protect the legs a little bit. And because you're saying that you're in Colombia right now, and you're kind of sad that you don't have anywhere to play field hockey. I don't know, in the Netherlands and England, is it really easy to find beer leagues? I don't know what they call them in England, but in Canada, for example, for hockey, for baseball, for mostly hockey, baseball, or even curling, we have beer leagues, which is just basically adults who aren't professionals that like to play the sport. They play with friends, and then after they finish the game, they drink some beers and they talk, and then they go back home. So we call it a beer league, but I'm not too sure if it's easy to find those types of leagues in England or the Netherlands for playing field hockey.
I've not tried. I've always been a member of a club and played for a club team. Yes. But the sport is one of the national sports in both countries. So there's a huge field hockey culture in the UK. Especially
I had no idea. I had no idea. I'm learning something new.
No, I mean, England in general, English people love sports. We have cricket, tennis, rugby. We've got football, obviously, field hockey. So I've mentioned tennis already, but yeah, so we have a lot of sports that we enjoy playing and enjoy watching. So you're never lost for choice. And the Netherlands as well, Dutch people are very much enamored with going outside. They love going out, whether it's cycling or playing sports. And so when you're living in both countries, it's hard not to get involved in a club or a team. It's a great way to meet people. And I thought, oh, if I come to Colombia, I can join a club as well. But I've not been able to find one. So if anybody knows of a Colombian field hockey team, please let me know. I'm happy to move to that city if need be, so I can play field hockey again.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things I could talk about, but I agree with you. One thing, people know that I love Colombia, and a lot of my students are Colombians, but that's one thing. I think not only Colombia, but in all Latin America, it's really hard to find those clubs of people playing sports. I remember, because you're in Cartagena right now, and I lived in Cartagena and for 1 year. And before that, I was in university and I was playing recreational volleyball. I liked volleyball, and I played volleyball in high school. And I was thinking, I'm going to go to Colombia. It's like you said, a great way to meet friends. Just join up with a rec league. We call it rec league. I'm not too sure what they call it in Europe. And just meet people, have fun, make friends. And I could never, ever find it. I think for soccer, it's a lot easier. It's pretty easy to find places to play soccer in Latin America, meet friends that way. But I don't play soccer, so I remember taking the Buseta, the Busetas in Cartagena. Yes. And I remember just being in the Buseta, and I'd see people playing volleyball and think to myself, I just want to play some volleyball. How do I join the team? How do I play volleyball? But it's very difficult in Latin America to find those recreational leagues and meet people, have some fun. So Colombians, get on it. Gotta help some of these foreigners and help each other, meet each other, and play sports together. Not just soccer all the time, for the other sports, right? So there's that point I want to make. And then, what's the other thing you're talking about? You're talking about all the sports in England. So I'm curious, because in Canada, I think our national sport, the official winter sport is hockey, of course. And the official summer sport is lacrosse. And they're both very Canadian sports. But in Britain, you listed all these sports. Are all of those national sports, or is there like one national sport in the United Kingdom and England? I'm not too sure. I never learned.
That's a fantastic question. I would say the national sport is football. I don't know if there's like an official, I don't know, I don't know if there's it's written somewhere that the official sport is football, but I would say football is what people live and breathe generally. But you'll get people that are crazy about cricket and tennis and rugby. So it's hard to really rank them because they have such a huge following, and most people follow all of them. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't dare to say, okay, well, we'd rank tennis here and rugby there. It's very tough. But I myself love rugby far more than football, and I love field hockey. So
really? Rugby?
It just depends on your preference.
Yeah, you like watching it? I'm guessing.
No, I don't play it.
But
I like watching it.
Watching it, okay. Yeah, I don't. Rugby seems interesting, but from my experience as a man from North America, just everybody else says rugby looks cool, but I have no idea how it works. You just look at it, like flying to get to score the point, and I guess it's kind of like Latin Americans watching American football, or probably maybe British people watching American football. Like, okay, it looks interesting, but I have no clue how it works. So it's the same thing for us with rugby. Even though I think the Canadian rugby team is starting to do a little bit better, but most Canadians think to themselves, why are we playing rugby? Let's just stick to hockey. Hockey's good enough. And okay, so in the Netherlands, there's biking, field hockey, we now know. And I'm just wondering, because you said you lived in a village. The other stereotype about the Netherlands are the fields of flowers. So when you're cycling on your bike to go to school, like, were you cycling past, canals and then fields of tulips? Was it like the super stereotypical windmill as well in the background?
It's a very good question. Partly yes, partly no. So where I've lived in various different villages around The Hague. None of them have fields of flowers. So I'm sorry to burst that bubble for you. but we had mainly fields with cows. So dairy farmers were around us.
Okay.
So we had the typical Frisian cow, excuse me, the Frisian cow, which is the black and white cow, the one that you often see with spots.
Okay.
So cycle past that. And the flowers are very common near Amsterdam. So there you have the tulip farms. There's a place called the Keukenhof. You go there sort of around March. And if you go to the Keukenhof around March, as far as the eye can see, fields of tulips, absolutely breathtaking. If you're ever in Europe and around that time, sort of early spring, sort of Easter time, check out the dates for the Keukenhof and you can go and visit and walk around. And they do sort of different works of art with tulips, and they do sort of different arrangements with different colors. So as you're walking around, you see these patterns and beautiful imagery with tulips. I think it's well worth the visit. If it's only sort of available for a short window, because after that they cut the heads off all the tulips and you just see the stems. So it's not ideal to go there once the heads have been cut off. But it's very beautiful. If you can go at the right time, the Keukenhof is breathtaking. So I recommend that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a stereotype when I think of the Netherlands, are the fields of tulips.
Yes.
Right. Now you grew up in the Netherlands until you were 18.
Correct.
Was there a reason that your family returned to the UK, or did your family stay in the Netherlands and you went to the UK? How did it work as soon as you turned 18?
Yeah, great question. So my family stayed in the UK. So they're there for work. So they stayed there until they retired. But because I went to a British school, I sat my GCSEs, which is your General Certificate of Secondary Education, allows you to graduate from high school. And then I went to something called Sixth Form College, which is the 2 years of preparation that you do to sit the A-level exams. And these are the exams that you use to get accepted into university. So because I sat those, I went to university in the UK.
Okay, this seems very seems very different from how we do it in Canada, United States.
Really?
So,
how is it in Canada?
Well, let me just. I'm going to ask some questions to figure it out. Okay, so yeah, but your family, no, but like your parents, were they in the Netherlands or the UK?
In the Netherlands, the whole time they've been in the Netherlands. So just me, I moved to the UK.
Oh yeah, okay, because I think you said the UK, and I was like, I thought they were in the Netherlands. Okay, so they're in the Netherlands, and they're still in the Netherlands right now.
Yes, my mother is, but my father's retired and he now lives in Portugal. So he's enjoying the sunshine there.
Oh, yeah. Famous Brits going to Spain and Portugal to enjoy the sunshine. Okay. Now, so what year did you, what's it called? The GSE, was it?
GCSE.
GCSE. So what year did you get your, like how old were you when you got your GCSE?
So I was 16. That's typically the age that you sort of graduate, for lack of a better word, from high school.
All right. Yeah. Actually, I went to Sweden. I think the Swedes do it very similarly, where basically people who don't want to go to university, they study till a certain time and then they can become an electrician, a plumber, a hairdresser, whatever. And the people who want to go to university, they got to go to a special high school. Yeah. So I guess for people listening, I think Latinos do very similar to Americans and Canadians. Basically, for us, we graduate when we're 18, pretty much. Everybody graduates, same level. There's no special branch of high school to go to. Just everybody graduates. And if you got good grades, then you go to university. Of course, I don't know if it's better or worse. I don't know. It's just the way that we do things. So basically, you graduated high school when you were 16. And is that normally for all British kids? They graduate when they're 16?
Yes, that's right. Yes. Okay.
And then basically kids who want to go to university, they take an extra 2 years.
Correct. Yes. So we call that the A-levels. It's broken up into two parts. So after your first year, you sit an exam called the AS, and then you study for another year and you do the complete A-level, also known as A2, but A-level. And those are the grades that you use for university. There's a huge difference as well, because at GCSE level, you are competing with all of your peers in the UK. So you study, excuse me, I'm recovering from a cold, so my throat is still not 100%. But you're competing with all of the kids at your age in the UK. And you have to take English, maths, and science. These are the compulsory courses. And then you can choose.
So, no, it's funny. So, so we It's the difference between American and British English. We're going to talk about this later, but
Okay.
yeah. So you said so. Yeah, for everybody listening, so she says maths, and for us in North America, we say math. I heard you say maths. I said, oh, that's very British.
Very
That's very
British.
British. Yeah. Okay,
So
so you
yeah,
study all those subjects. Yeah.
as compulsory, and then you can select which ones you want to specialize in. So I think I
Mhm.
took geography, history, French,
Mhm.
Spanish. I took something else and I can't remember what it was, but I took a few
Uh-huh.
extra ones. So I think you end up taking anywhere between, I'm guessing, 6 or more A levels. I think I took 10 or something, or 11.
Okay.
And then you graduate from high school. And as you said, you can join the military if you want to, you can get a job, you can go to a technical college and learn a technical skill.
Okay.
It's up to you what you wish to do at 16. If
Mhm.
you want to go to university, you go to a place called a sixth form college. And this is another difference between North American English and British English.
Okay.
College, I think for you guys, is university, whereas for us is what we do as preparatory studies for university. Yeah, so if you say to someone, I'm in college, we think sixth form college. You're between the ages of 16 and 18.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And those colleges, is it pretty much the same building, same place as the schools before, or is it a completely different building, completely different location than the school that you went to before?
And that's a great question. In the UK, it can be a different building, but because I was in the Netherlands, we only had one British school, so we had to go to that only sixth form college. They didn't have a variety of different colleges for us to choose from. It was just that one. So we would just transition through, and it was in the same building for ease. So, and for your AS and A levels, you take fewer subjects. So you start to narrow down the subjects that you take and start to specialize. So
yeah, because it sounded like a lot. So you're saying before, like, normal school is like 10, like there's 10, 11 different subjects that you're taking. And then you go into this college, you narrow it down. Yeah. Okay. So how many subjects do you narrow it down to? Is like 4, 3?
Yeah, exactly right. So for AS level, which is that first year, most students take around 4 or 5 subjects. And then for the second year, you might drop one and narrow down even further. So you might then sit and get 3 A levels or 4. Most people do 3. And so when you apply to universities, the universities will have an entrance requirement based on 3 grades. So they might say, excuse me, they might say AAB, for example. And in which case, if you have 4 A levels, you can choose your top 3 grades in order to meet that requirement. So students will take more to spread their answers.
Okay. Ooh, sounds very interesting. Okay. And okay, I'm trying to. I'm pretty sure anybody watching this, I'm probably just as confused as you are for the person watching this. I think I kind of understand, but I'm curious. Like, for example, I studied political science in Canada, and I think obviously I had to get good grades in certain subjects, but I had grades in math, history, geography, all the subjects, biology, science, physics. So, for example, if I'm in the UK and I want to study political science and I'm doing the A levels, are there certain A levels that I need to take? Or, I don't know, could I take physics A level, math A level, and English literature A level and still apply for political science? Or basically the university will tell you guys, okay, if you want to study political science in Cambridge, Oxford, wherever, these are the A levels you got to take. These are the grades you need if you want to get into this program. Is that how it works? Or how does it work for getting into the program you want in the university?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for example, if someone's watching this and they have a child and they're thinking of moving to the UK, it's important for them to help guide their child in that decision-making process. Normally, schools have a guidance counselor, not a guidance counselor, a career counselor. Wrong word.
I think you
career
could also.
Counselor that would.
Okay.
You're right. You could use both words, but I think we typically use the word career counselor that will help guide you into what you would like to do. And so you do have to think about that when you're choosing your AS and A-level subjects. So it's a big decision at 16 to start thinking about, well, what career do I want? What do I want to study at university? Usually, if you're a kid that want to go to university, you have some idea of what you would like to study.
Mhm.
The universities will publish any requirements that they have in terms of
Mhm.
what AS and A levels you should take. When I was applying for university many, many moons ago, a long time ago,
Mhm.
it wasn't that strict. If they did require, for example, a science background, they would say
Mhm.
so, but they were also quite flexible. What I mean by that is that if you choose some subjects and later on decide that you want to study something else at university,
Mhm.
they would take a look and say, well, take myself as an example. I wanted to study psychology.
Mhm.
And so to do psychology, you need to have some understanding of statistics. If you
Mhm.
didn't study maths at AS or A level, they would have
Mhm.
a look at your GCSE grades and say you must get a minimum of a grade C in
Oh, okay.
maths at GCSE level.
Mhm.
And if you have that, then we'll accept you, even though you didn't do maths at AS or A level.
Mhm.
So there is some wiggle room. There is some flexibility.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, for example, yeah, I studied political science, but I was also really interested in architecture. So you just kind of have to do your research. If you
Yeah.
at first you think you're going to do political science, and then I think I want to switch to architecture. Maybe you can still get in, but you just have to do your research and figure out, okay. Well, that's a question. So yeah, let's say you change. Let's say you're in college and you decide, okay, I don't want to do political science. I want to do architecture, but they're saying that I have to have this grade in GCSE or this A level. I don't know, in the United States and Canada, you can go to a community college. We call them a community college, again, to be kind of like a cheap university, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And you would just take a course to get the grades that you need in order to now get into the university. Is it similar in the UK, where if you decide to switch and you need to get a certain grade in a certain subject, that you can take that in, I don't know, I don't know, a private university, a private institution, and get that grade, or do you have to go back to the college? How does that work?
That's a great question. I don't have any experience in that because it's fortunately not happened to me.
Yeah.
I did have a friend at university who did switch, but he
Mhm.
switched within the same sort of department.
Mhm.
So there it wasn't so problematic because it was still within I think it was the English department. So he switched, I think, from literature to something else, and it
Okay.
was fine.
Mhm.
But if it's a huge shift, like if you want to go from English literature to medicine,
Yeah.
and you don't have sciences in your
Yeah.
AS or A level examination, then I don't know. I would imagine they would either make you do a foundation course. A lot of universities will
Mhm.
do that as a
Okay.
transition,
Yeah. So it'd be
or you
similar to
might
how
have
we
to
do.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. We do the same thing. Whereas if you don't have certain grades, then you take these foundation courses in the university. Okay, that makes sense. Very interesting. I'm learning so much right now about the UK. I'm thinking all about this. Okay, so what did you study at university then? Was it psychology, or did you change your mind?
I did change my mind. I studied psychology. I have a degree in psychology.
Yeah.
Originally, I wanted to do forensic psychology. I was really fascinated by that.
Yeah.
But I didn't get accepted for my master's. And so when I wasn't accepted for the master's course, I then started working, and I worked at an oil and gas company. And
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was lucky that the head of legal counsel took a liking to me. And so she sort of ushered me into sort of her department, and I was sort of like their admin assistant.
Okay. Mhm.
And was really interested in what they were doing. I think that shows the importance of work experience and also finding great bosses.
Yeah,
And
for
she
sure.
would talk me through what they were doing, explain to me some of the terms in the contract, and I developed a real liking for it. So I decided to go to law school and switch to law and qualify as a lawyer. In the UK at the time, there were two routes into law. One is the traditional route, which is you go to university and you study for an undergraduate degree in law. And then after that, you can do take one of two routes. So it's a postgraduate qualification, either to become a solicitor or to become a barrister. So you really have to choose what type of lawyer you want to be. And this, I can imagine you've got a question about.
Well, because I think I read about this a few years ago. Because in Canada, United States, I think we just call them lawyers or attorneys. But in the UK, they have solicitors and barristers. So I don't know, for me and for anybody watching this, what are they, and what's the difference between a solicitor and a barrister?
Yes, so a solicitor is normally the first person you go to, typically, if you need legal advice. And so they work in law firms, and they would assess whatever issue you have, and they would try and resolve it without you needing to go to court. So if you have some sort of dispute, they would try and write letters to the other side, negotiate some sort of settlement, or reach some sort of agreement. They also deal with things like buying and selling property, employment contracts, buying and selling of companies. In short, if it requires paperwork, solicitors do it.
Okay.
Barristers are lawyers that have the right of audience. That means that they have the right to stand in court and speak to a judge, and address a judge, the jury, cross-examine witnesses. They're the ones that you see on television with like the horse hair wigs and the robes.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones that sort of present your case when it becomes very contentious and there's no other way of resolving it. So if you have a dispute, you'd go to your solicitor first. They would try and resolve it. If it has to go to court, then the solicitor would help you find a barrister. They would pass the information to the barrister, and then the barrister would then decide the best strategy in court to represent your case. And so they're the ones that will do that. There are hybrids. There are solicitor advocates that are solicitors that can speak in court. But just in simple terms, the barristers are the ones that you see with the wigs that talk to the judge, and the solicitors, which is what I qualified in, we do the paperwork. In very simple terms, that's the difference.
Okay, so because I always thought it was just the judge that had the funny wig, but it's also the solicitors. They also have the wig. So basically, the judge and the solicitors, they have the funny wigs.
The barristers do, yes. The barristers do. It's sort of almost like a uniform to make them all equal before the law.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Does the judge also have a wig, or no wig for the judge?
It depends what type of what level you are in the court. Yes, which type of court you go to. But yes, they do.
Okay, interesting. All right. And I just had a question about just we call it a bachelor's degree in Canada, United States. Is it the same for you guys, a bachelor's degree, or do you guys call it something else?
We call it bachelor's degree or undergraduate degree. We use both terms.
And is it, so for us, it's normally 4 years. Is it the same for you guys in Britain, or is it shorter, longer? How long is the program usually?
It's 3 years typically, but sometimes it can be extended to a 4th year, especially if you have what we call a sandwich year, where you do 1 year in industry or 1 year abroad. We call that a sandwich year. So.
Oh, really? It's like, well, we have a gap year, but I think a gap year is more when you just go traveling, just travel, discover the world. But I don't think you're really studying anything. All right. Okay, interesting. Oh, I had another question about that, but it's fascinating. And then for the master's degree, for us, it's normally about like 1-2 years. Is it the same for you guys, or is it longer, or is it shorter?
It's 1 year. So when I mentioned before that there are 2 routes into law, the traditional one is the one we've just discussed, where you go to law school and do your bachelor's degree in law.
Yeah.
The second route is the one that I took. So you can go to a specialized law school, and you do a 1 year conversion called a GDL, Graduate Diploma in Law, where you in effect study the 3 years that a student would for their undergraduate degree, but it's condensed down to 1 year.
Yeah.
It's incredibly intense, not for the faint of heart either.
Yeah.
But in some institutions, you can do your GDL and then do your postgraduate specialization, either as a barrister or as a solicitor. And together, they will give you, in addition, a bachelor's degree in law, which is what I have as well. So I have a bachelor's degree in law, I have my GDL, and I have my LPC, which is to be a solicitor. Very complicated.
I don't know. For you guys, it sounds fancy, but for me, it sounds fancy.
No, not at all.
Who knows? Maybe Britain, it's like, oh yeah, she's just that. But when I hear all these fancy names, I think, oh well, very impressive. All these titles and degrees.
But there's another third route that's just opened up. So the reason I mention this is in case someone who's watching has a bachelor's degree in another subject, let's say in business, and they want to come to the UK and become a lawyer, you can consider looking at the GDL route, and different universities that offer that. The other route is if you're younger, they're now doing an apprenticeship scheme. So you can become a solicitor over, I think, 6 or 8 years, and
Okay.
you work while you study. And the reason this was created, or one of many reasons, is to encourage students of all family backgrounds to apply. The universities in the UK are becoming increasingly expensive, and therefore excludes a lot of students from being able to study there. And so with this solicitor apprenticeship, you are working, earning money, gaining experience every day in the law firm, whilst also taking classes and sitting exams. And this started when I was at the law firm. So I think it must have been 2016, 2017, when the law firm that I was working at started recruiting their first round of solicitor apprentices.
Okay.
So I think that's another route that people can consider if they're thinking of coming to the UK and looking for their qualifications in law.
Well, actually, I'm surprised. There's always lots of. I always have lots of students, and I know there's lots of Latinos, especially Venezuelans. I know a lot of Venezuelans that they studied law in Venezuela. Obviously, because of the situation, they had to leave. And I know a lot of them are in Florida, for example. But I guess there's a Venezuelan that studied law, and you want to go to the UK. Well, that'd be good advice to figure out how to get your law qualifications and begin practicing law again. Instead of cleaning bathrooms, I know lots of them had to go to Florida, clean bathrooms, something like that. I have a degree in law. Why am I cleaning bathrooms at Walmart? It's not fun.
It's tough going. To study law is pretty tough. It's not an easy go. And I can understand if you dedicate hours of your life to studying something with dreams of what you want to do, it can be very difficult if you move abroad. So for myself, not that it's comparative, but I left the UK and I now live in Colombia. I can't work as a lawyer in Colombia. I'm not qualified in Colombian law. It's one of those professions that doesn't allow you to travel and take that knowledge overseas. It's very difficult. So it is restrictive in that sense. But the one other thing is, if you do have a qualification in law, I would recommend that you look at the Law Society website in the UK. There are some countries whose qualifications are recognized in the UK. And it might be that you simply have to do a 1-year conversion or submit some particular type of paperwork, and it might get recognized in the UK. So it's worth, before you sign up to any courses, have a look at the Law Society website first. That would be my last bit of advice.
All right, good. I had one more question about university, because you said that normally for the bachelor's degree it's about 3 years, and then you said there's also a possibility to extend it to a 4th year. So I'm curious about that, because there's lots of Canadians and Americans. We start studying university, and then we say, I need a bit of a break. And some of them will take the gap year that I told you, where they'll go traveling for a year. Some people, they decide they don't really like their degree, so they'll spend a year, 2 years working, and then they'll basically go back to university, but they'll switch directions. Is the UK stricter? Because just the way that you said it kind of sounded like once you're in, it's 3 years, possibility that you can extend to a 4th year, but this is the path you're taking. You can't really go in a different direction. So I'm just curious, is it very strict, or in your guys' system, can you guys also take time off and work or travel just like we do in North America?
I don't think it's quite as flexible. Again, I've studied in the US, but from watching TV shows, I'm not sure of how accurate it is. It seemed quite odd to me that you could be enrolled in university for 1 or 2 years and not yet have a major, not yet decided upon what you want to study. For us, no, you apply directly knowing what your major is going to be. It's not that you apply to the university and then find out 1 or 2 years later, or declare it 1 or 2 years later. It's decided beforehand. In many cases, at least a year or two beforehand, because you have to select your AS and A levels accordingly.
Well, it seems like with the A level system, you guys are basically preparing yourselves for a specific route in university. We don't really have that. We more or less, it's 18, you graduate, you kind of get the equivalent of the GCSE, and then you go to university, take a whole bunch of foundation courses, and then for me it's true. Basically 3rd year, that's usually when you decide what your major is. Obviously you have to take the right foundational courses if you want to choose a major, but you basically have 2 years just fool around, figure out what you like, and then decide what your major is. So it sounds like it's a little bit stricter in the UK about how you study. Whereas a lot very flexible in Canada, United States. Yeah, I would say very flexible. All right, now your personal life, I guess. You studied to be a lawyer.
Correct.
I think for most Latinos, I was thinking, well, you studied law in UK. UK is one of the most developed countries in the world. Why are you living in Colombia, and why aren't you working in law? It seems like a good job in the UK. Make those UK pounds. Well, tell us how you went from basically solicitor to living in Colombia and teaching English.
Yes. So in the UK, when you graduate from the university with a qualification in law and your postgraduate, either as a solicitor or a barrister, you then have to do a certain period of time of training to fully qualify. And so to be a solicitor, it's 2 years of work experience called I've forgotten the word now, it just left my mind. The training contract came back to me. So it's 2 years of a training contract if you wish to be a solicitor. So you have to apply to law firms to do your training contract at that law firm. And there's normally a 2-year wait between when you get accepted and when you start your training contract.
Oh, really?
So it's very unusual. I don't know why. It's a bit of a mystery to me as to why it's set up that way. But some students will be very organized and they will apply to law firms for their training contract whilst they are studying their law degree. So that when they graduate, they immediately enter into the law firm and start their training contract. I decided not to do that. Instead, I wanted to secure my training contract years in advance and think, right, I've got my 2 years gap, which I can use for whatever I wish. And in this 2-year gap, I can work for a little bit, gain some work experience, save up some money and travel. You mentioned before about gap years. A lot of UK students, when they leave sixth form college, will go on a gap year for a year, travel around the world, and then start university. I didn't have that option. I went straight to university. And so I wanted my gap year, so to speak. I thought after studying so hard, I want to relax. So that's what I did. So I applied. I knew I had a job secured in 2 years' time. I started working. I worked at a court in the Netherlands. And I was advised that you should really consider taking up some languages because that would be very helpful for you. It will make you more attractive as a lawyer. And so I was taking French classes at the time. But I thought, well, if I travel to France, do I really want to spend months and months in France? I wasn't quite sure. I was looking at schools in Montpellier and it just didn't fit. It didn't feel right. And then I thought, well, how about Spanish? And at the time, I had completed my master's in human rights. I had focused on Venezuela, because you mentioned Venezuela before. I used that as my case study. And I was curious about Latin American culture. I don't know if it happened to you, but for me, there were little sort of hits along the way of, I had a friend at law school, one of my closest friends at law school is Colombian. I did a volunteer program one summer in Latin America. And so these little experiences, these little things along the way, doing Spanish at GCSE level, it sort of all came together. And I thought, why not Spanish? It's all sort of been the thing that's drawn a natural interest from me.
Pointing in that direction,
It's pointing me in that direction. And I don't know why Colombia. I don't know why Cartagena. It was just one of those things where I was just Googling Spanish schools in Latin America, and I just saw pictures of Cartagena. I thought, this is where I'd like to go. It seemed a mixture of a place where I could learn Spanish, but also have a bit of a holiday and get to know South America. And I thought, if I don't like it, I can continue traveling around the continent. And so I went and I took an intensive course. I signed up for 3 months in a school called Centro Catalina in the center of Cartagena. And within 2 months, met my husband, my now husband. And that was it. The rest is history.
Okay, so I guess in a way, it wasn't the plan.
No,
like you're planning on learning Spanish, going back, and then doing your training for 2 years. But you've fell in love, some Latin American passion, and now you're stuck. Now you're stuck in Colombia. All right.
Happily, I wouldn't say stuck. I'm very happy to be here. But that is essentially what happened, and I think as someone who has studied multiple languages in different ways, I would suggest to those looking to learn, for example, English, to choose something that calls to you. I know many times we get these external voices that say you should study this language. For me, it was French, because French was in the past, the language used in international law. A lot of documents are written in French, but it just felt like it felt very difficult to learn it. There was a lot of resistance to it. Whereas with Spanish, it came to me a lot more naturally. And so I feel that you need to choose what works best for you rather than listen to the external voices. I would also suggest choosing something that you love. Oftentimes they say the best way to learn a language is to fall in love. You don't have to do it literally, like to fall in love with a person, even though that's what happened to me, but fall in love with what you're studying. So for me with Dutch, I love Dutch music. There are very poetic lyrics in Dutch music. And I also subscribe to a Dutch magazine about psychology, and I would read the articles multiple times to try and improve my vocabulary. So you can love a subject like psychology and use that as your gateway to the language. You could do that the same with English. If you love business, read business articles, and you'd be fascinated enough to reread, because if you don't love what you're studying, it becomes very boring, tedious to repeat and reread. And that's what you need to do. You need to expose yourself to things as much as possible, as often as possible. And repetition is really key. And if you don't like it, it's awful. It's really awful. So you really do have to find your passion in what you're studying. And so when I came to Cartagena, it was impossible not to learn Spanish. I loved the culture. I loved the climate. I was dating a wonderful guy. My teachers were incredible. They made sure that I got involved in the local community. So we would do surveys in the streets, interviewing people to get used to hearing the Costeño accent. They would make us sing songs. They would take us to the movie theater, to concerts. And very, very quickly, I developed my Spanish from a GCSE level to now almost fluent level. So it's thanks to them, really. So it really helped me.
Yeah, it sounds like a good school for sure. And now Cartagena is an interesting place. I lived in Cartagena for 1 year in 2015. Well, so yeah, when did you go to Cartagena? Was it 2018?
It was 2015. Yeah, we were in Cartagena at the same time.
Oh, same time. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so I was in Cartagena at the same time as you. But yeah, Costeños are a very special breed. I would say not only in Colombia, I would say in all Latin America, they're very, very special. So I could ask you a whole bunch of questions. Well, maybe I'll give everybody my experience. So for me personally, I love Costeños. I say just they're super happy. They love life and they're super relaxed. One of my favorite Costeño expressions is cógelo suave, which is just like Costeños always telling me now in the past is cógelo suave, like why are you worried? Like, why are you worried? Just cógelo suave, cógelo suave. Obviously can't say that in Mexico because it sounds very dirty, but for Costeños, they use it all the time. At the same time, it's very difficult for me to live in Cartagena because now this is interesting because you said you like the climate. For me, I hated the climate so much because it's so hot. I'm Canadian, so it's interesting because you grew up in the Netherlands. It's not that hot in the Netherlands either. So in my case, it was just way too hot for me in Cartagena. I love the people, but the city was very chaotic and the heat was oppressive, as we would say in English. So I really loved the people. I loved hanging out with them. They had really good energy, but just the heat and the chaos of the city. Because lots of Colombians or even foreigners, they'll go to Cartagena and they'll go to the walled city, which I think is where your school was. And yeah, it's a beautiful place. But once you get out of the walled city and you go into the real Cartagena, is just, if you want anarchy, the definition of anarchy, just go to the middle of Cartagena. You'll see some of the craziest driving, the craziest roads, the craziest urban planning that you've ever seen. So that was my own experience. But now you said you like the climate, and it seems like you more or less fell in love with the coast of Colombia or the Cartageneros. So yeah, what's your own story with them? What did you like about them? What did you like about the climate? Yeah, what did you like about Cartagena?
For me, it felt like the opening scene of like The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Where Dorothy lives in her
Mhm.
home and it's all black and white. And
Mhm.
suddenly she opens the door and she's in the land of Oz and it's all multicolored.
Yeah.
That's how it felt for me to move from the UK to Cartagena. It
Mhm.
felt like, oh, this is life in color. Like there was a sensory overload. I'd walk down the streets, and as you said, it is chaotic in that you
Mhm.
hear music blaring, you hear horns,
Mhm.
you hear people shouting, and not in a negative way, just talking to each other in a loud
Mhm.
voice. You could smell food left, right, and center. It was just a lot to take in. But I thought, like, oh, like I finally feel like very alive because
Mhm.
of all of this sort of all of these things happening around me. Everyone around was sort of really living life to the max. And you know, winter in England is quite grey, it's quite
Yeah.
dull, it's cold, it can be lonesome. And
Mhm.
so that comparison was quite
Mhm.
striking. And when I went back as well, I went back to the UK and I felt so sad because I just looked around and it was just very grey. And I
Mhm.
would just think back to Cartagena. And again, everything that I would remember was bright colours, the people wearing brightly coloured clothes, the blue sky, the colourful buildings. It was just such a big contrast. And I felt very happy and just very, I don't know, sort of elated when I was there, overjoyed.
Yeah.
So that's why I always associate Cartagena with a lot of beautiful memories. I was also very fortunate with my teacher. I still keep in contact with my teacher. I'm very happy to be able to call her my friend. She, within the first week of classes, invited me and all my classmates to her home.
Yeah.
And we met her parents, her siblings, her uncles, her aunts, everybody. And they
Yeah.
made us a Colombian lunch. And
Okay.
my class was full of mainly Swiss students and myself, and we
Okay.
were just very surprised that we were invited to her home and to meet
Yeah.
her family within a week. In Europe,
Mhm.
this wouldn't happen.
No.
And so I was struck by their warmth. I was struck by their friendliness,
Mhm.
the want to share what they had, to make sure that we had a great time. They owed us nothing. The
Yeah.
most the teacher owed us was a few classes in Spanish. But
Mhm.
the fact that after school, they would use up their free time to accompany us to the cinema, to accompany us to concerts and tell
Yeah.
us of events happening in the city.
Yeah.
There were festivals. If there were, I don't know, if there were different events going on, they would invite us even to their own
Yeah.
personal events. And I couldn't, it's impossible, I feel, to go to Cartagena, have that experience and not want to stay.
Yeah.
I felt immediately part of the family, and it was very painful to leave after
Yeah.
having such a welcome that many years ago.
Yeah, I would say costeños in general are incredibly hospitable people.
Yeah.
I think Colombians in general, but the costeños are incredibly hospitable. They're very generous. That's actually one thing I think with all Colombians. I think you have the same experience, but like I know that I'm Canadian. I know that I make dollars. I know that I have more money than a lot of Colombians. And it always surprises me, like even if it's like a young Colombian, 21 years old in university, they'll invite you to a restaurant or a bar, and you're thinking, okay, I'm the foreigner. I know I got more money than these guys. I can pay for my own food or my own drinks, and I can pay for theirs if they want. But from my experience with Colombians, it's like they will never let you pay. They will never let you pay for anything. It doesn't matter if they're just in university and they don't have a lot of money, they're going to make sure that you're taken care of. They're paying for your food, they're paying for your drinks. And yeah, people sometimes ask me like why I love Colombians. And I would say that's one of the things, is not because I'm cheap, not because I want people paying for my stuff. It's just they're so hospitable. They do everything in their power to make you feel at home, to make you feel welcome. And I've had so many experiences, like you said, where you meet somebody and they take you to meet their family. They're not really suspicious. They're not like, oh, who's this guy? Just as soon as they meet you, they're happy that you're there. They're cooking you food and they're making you feel welcome into their home, into their community. And yeah, I definitely I love that aspect of Colombians, especially costeños. Yes. All right.
I was going to
Which one
say
I
that's
want?
one of the big culture shocks, I think, for me, because
Yeah.
as I was looking around the table at the other students, we were all sort of a bit surprised that we were there, but we were very, very grateful to be there. But it's one of the big culture shocks in the UK. It really takes a while to get welcomed into the family. And I think that's something that isn't taken into account when people move from Latin America to the UK. It's hard to get settled into the community, whereas it's very easy for us foreigners to do that here in Colombia, because they welcome us with open arms. At least that's the experience I've had.
Yeah.
But I also noticed as well, to touch on what you just mentioned, the emphasis on having a good time or creating beautiful memories is very much the focus here. Whereas in the UK, just from my personal experience, people tend to be more focused on what they can buy or what they can get, or what their surroundings look like. And to put it into comparison, like if you were to go out with your friends, it's all about, okay, what's the newest nightclub that's there? How does it look? Let's get beautiful seats. Let's take photographs. Let's wear some new clothes. Whereas in Colombia, you can go out in whatever you have on. They don't mind as long as you come. You can be on the front deck of someone's house with just some plastic chairs and a bottle from the local corner shop. And you have the best night of your life, because it's all about the company and the friendship. It's not about how much money do you have, how much are you going to spend, what are you going to buy. At least from my experience, I know that there might be some Colombians who go, you're completely wrong, but just from my experience, the emphasis has been on that, on creating beautiful memories. And that's something that sadly I feel is a little bit lost in the UK, and why I chose to then permanently move to Colombia rather than return to the UK. I felt much happier that the focus in life was a bit more healthy. It was more about community, family, friends. And I'm very lucky that my husband's family welcomed me in as one of their own, his friends as well. I'm happy to say are friends of mine. And so I felt that there's like a whole community around me that support me, and that's a beautiful thing. I don't know if I could have given him that if he had moved to the UK. And that's one of the key decisions of staying in Colombia, one of the big cultural differences, I feel.
Actually, you talked about the patio and the plastic chairs. That's very costeño. Where I think in the Caribbean in general, I think if you go to Dominican Republic or you go to Puerto Rico, or if you're able to go to Cuba, they always have the terrazas in the front, and you always have the rocking chair, usually for the abuela. And then for me, when I was in the coast, I think they call it fiestas familiares. So they always have the family parties. And so it seems like the best party in Barranquilla, Santa Marta, Monteria, Sincelejo, wherever, was always the family parties. And you would go there and the father's dancing with the daughter, the mother's dancing with grandpa. They have big speakers, and you think, where did they get these speakers from? But they always have the big speakers, and everybody's drinking aguardiente or rum. It's a very costeño scene for sure. I know what you're talking about. So I don't think you're a liar. Don't worry. I don't think you're a liar, Virginia. I think you're telling the truth. I'm curious about your husband, because you said you met him, I think, within 2 months once you arrived. So your husband, was he just a regular costeño that you met in the streets? Did you meet him at a party? Did you meet him at school? Was he a guest? Or how did you meet your husband?
Yes, so as I mentioned, my teachers would get us involved in activities in the community. And so they told us that there was a local band that was performing called Caribe Funk. At the time, they had I don't know if you've not heard their music, I highly recommend it. They're very, very good. They were a year or two ago nominated for a Latin Grammy. They've now exploded. They travel around the world. Nice. So I highly recommend, if you see a concert of theirs, to go. They often perform in Argentina, if you're interested, they're great. So they were performing in Cartagena, and our school decided, okay, we'll take the students down to go to the concert. So I went along, and this guy came up to me and asked me to dance. And being a typical British person, I said, no, I don't dance. So, And then promptly felt an elbow nudge me from the side from my teacher, saying, Virginia, you're here not just to learn Spanish, but to get to know the Colombian culture. This is a nice guy. I actually know him. He's a gentleman. Go and dance with him. So then I said, okay, fine, I'll dance with you. Didn't want to, but my teacher made me go. And then we danced, and it was very funny because in the concert there were lots of people dancing salsa, and as you know, it's hot in Cartagena, so people are dancing cheek to cheek, sweating. And we took up half the dance floor dancing arm's distance because he didn't want to spook me. But after
Yeah,
first dance,
that's a gentleman, yeah, because a lot of costeño men, they're not gonna give you that space for sure.
no, definitely not. So I was very grateful that he was being very respectful. Then I invited him for the second dance, and then the third, and then before I knew it, we spent the entire concert dancing together. And as someone who hates dancing, I felt like the time flew by, and we exchanged numbers and met up regularly after then, and been inseparable ever since. And that was 2015. So yes, 7 and a bit years ago now. So quite a long time ago.
And when you started, like those first few times meeting up, like were they dates, or was it more just, oh, you're a cool guy, let's just hang out, and then it slowly turned into a relationship? Or were you both, after that concert, both, hearts in the eyes and thinking, I want to, like a Caribbean love and the passion, and just you wanted to spend as much time as possible with that person?
No, for me at least, when we met up, it was for dates. And I mean, I remember our first official date was on the Muralla, on the city wall, to watch a lunar eclipse. So it was quite a romantic first date. The difficulty, of course, is because I was still sort of studying Spanish, and it was difficult to communicate, because you obviously want the person to like you. You want them to get to know your personality,
for sure,
but you don't have the vocabulary for it. So it was a bit sort of like a Charlie Chaplin movie where I'm acting things out and trying to show my humor and my interest, because I didn't really have the vocabulary to do it. Luckily, he spoke a bit of English, so if I couldn't find the word, I would say it in English. If I didn't understand him, he would try and translate. Otherwise, we would use Google Translate to communicate with one another. But I didn't have a lot of high hopes once I extended my time, I think, to a 4th month. But then I had to go back to Europe. And so I didn't have high hopes of ever seeing him again. And so I just thought it's just
so in your mind,
romance.
you kind of, just like a summer romance, a summer fling, and then, we got to go our separate ways.
Exactly. But then he messaged me saying, oh, I'm going to come to Europe. It was about, I don't know, 6-7 months later. I'm going to come to Europe.
Were you guys still in contact, or did you guys kind of just go silent for a few months?
No, we kept in contact, but just sort of as friends, just sort of checking in. But it wasn't sort of like a daily thing or anything like that. Just sort of check in every now and again. And so he came over. He visited the Netherlands. He saw where I grew up. We went together to Italy. I introduced him to a cousin. I've got a cousin in Italy. Got to know Rome and Florence. And then he went off to the rest of his trip. Went around Spain and a bunch of other different countries. And then went back. And I think in total, we must have spent maybe 2 weeks out of his, not even 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half we spent together during that time traveling. And then we still kept in contact. And I miss Colombia. Why don't I go and visit him? So then I went and visited him. And it just very gradually sort of developed into a long distance relationship. I think one of the keys of that relationship was that we didn't put any pressure to define it. And we didn't sort of put any expectations on the other of, you have to come and see me within this time period, or you have to message me every day, or you have to, it was very, very sort of, as you said, cojo suave, very organic, just see how it goes. And it was wonderful, because I've had long distance relationships before, and they were awful, because you feel very stressed and very insecure, and it doesn't work out well.
And you have to like maintain it. It's like, okay, I got to do this every day. I got to make sure I'm sending messages every day. We got to plan out a trip in 2 months so that we can spend some time together.
And there's a lot of pressure on that trip, because you haven't seen each other in a long time, and that tends to stress both of you out, and it ends up terrible. So I had awful experiences in the past with long distance, which is why I didn't want to have one with him, and vice versa. So he had the same as well. And I think because both of us were very reluctant to have a long distance relationship, we didn't put any pressure on the other, and it worked out great. And after about 3 years of traveling every 6 months to see each other for about 3 weeks, I finished my training contract, and I was offered a job to stay at the law firm.
I was curious about that, because you said you went back to UK. So so that's what you still kind of were following the path to become a solicitor, and you finished your training.
So yeah, so
And then,
as I mentioned, I took the Spanish course during that gap, and then the relationship continued while I was working at the law firm doing my training contract. And when I finished, I was offered a job to stay as a solicitor, and I thought I can either stay, in which case I have to sort of end things with my husband because I'm going to set up a life here in the UK, or I could say no to this job, go to Colombia. My plan was to go for 3 months and live together, see if the relationship was something worth pursuing seriously. And then if so, figure out what I was going to do then. I thought, well, if we decided that we wanted to be together, we could choose Colombia or the UK. And if it was the UK, then I could get a job back in the UK at another law firm or even the same one. The law firm said, keep in contact. So that's what I did. And so I came to Cartagena, stayed here for 3 months. We rented an apartment for 3 months and lived together, and it went really well. So we've been living together since then.
Okay. Actually, I don't think I was really planning on talking about this with you, but you probably know that I make videos on YouTube helping Latinas with gringos. But I think what you said is, I find lots of Latinas that send me messages saying, you know, I don't know what I have with this guy, that have long distance relationships, kind of like what you had with your husband. And I think I have the same mentality as you and your husband. Just, you know, you just kind of have to let whatever happens. If things develop into something serious, they develop into something serious. But yeah, as soon as you try to define a relationship, it gets very stressful. You don't want to disappoint the other person. And yeah, somebody else was talking about that the other day on Twitter. They were saying, just when you meet somebody you like, you know, don't force the issue, just kind of let it take its own path. And if it goes along the path of marriage or kids or whatever, just let it go along that way. So I like what you said about that. Just, you met your husband, there's no expectations. You guys kind of just let yourselves, I guess, fall in love with each other. And so far, it seems like you guys have a good relationship.
No, yes, definitely. I would say that what you just said, certainly. I think if it's meant to be, and you think this is the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with, there's no need to hurry things along, because you can't hurry on eternity. You know, you've got to take things as they come and enjoy that process, because you're only dating for a period, and then if you're married, and so you've got to enjoy those early months or early years of the relationship, because they're meant to be the best. They're the honeymoon period. And if in the honeymoon period you are stressed and you feel insecure and you're not sure if this is working out, then that's really the signs that things aren't going very well. My father always said the best time in your relationship is that period. And so if you're miserable, then get out, because it's not going to bode well for you, in your future. And I really stuck to that. And even though we didn't put pressure on each other, I didn't ever feel insecure or disrespected. I know that there's a time difference. So if I messaged him, he didn't reply back, I know that he would reply within a 24-hour window. It wasn't that he ever ghosted me or left me, sort of hanging, waiting for a response. There was always a mutual respect. We were always very open and honest with each other. When we wanted to make time to talk to each other, there was something serious that we wanted to discuss, either a work pressure or a family issue, we would schedule that time and we would honor that time. So that would be my suggestion. When I say you don't need to put any expectations on the person or on the relationship or give it a name, that doesn't mean that you should accept someone ghosting you or disrespecting you in any way. So just to find the right balance of what makes you feel comfortable. And if you feel uncomfortable, mention it, talk about it. And if it doesn't get fixed, then that's the red flag. At least it would be for me, because if you're talking to someone that you love and they don't really want to make any changes to make you feel comfortable, then they don't really show that same respect to you. And I think that's a key issue in many relationships, where people hold on longer than they should, or they force something that is not natural for that relationship, and it falls apart quite easily. And I've been guilty of that too. So it's an easy trap to fall into. Yeah,
you live and you learn, right? You live and
you learn. Exactly right. Yes.
And was there a moment where you guys said, okay, we're boyfriend, girlfriend? Like, obviously you guys are married, but I'm just curious because my experience with Latinas is that they usually want to know what they are. So they want to know, like, am I your girlfriend or whatever? Like, so did you guys have a moment where he said, okay, will you be my girlfriend, or did he say you're my girlfriend, or was it just like, oh, I guess we're boyfriend girlfriend, we're spending lots of time together, we're boyfriend girlfriend? Was it very organic, or was there a moment where I guess he pops a question to you about, okay, I want you to be my girlfriend?
Good question. We didn't have a conversation about it.
No?
It was more of, if he'd introduced me to his friend, oh, this is my girlfriend. I said, oh, okay, right, I'm the
Yeah.
friend. So it was just that. It was very spontaneous. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, again, that's why I tell Latinos when they ask me, just, when he wants you to be his girlfriend, he's probably just going to say to his friends, like, oh yeah, this is my girlfriend. Yeah. And then what about how long have you guys been married? A few years, I'm guessing?
Coming up to 2 years. Yeah, 2 years in June. So,
okay.
Yes.
So did you guys get married during the pandemic then?
We got married during the pandemic. Yeah, on Zoom.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was a bit unorthodox, but I thought that was the perfect fit because it was a bit of an unorthodox relationship to begin with. So it seemed perfect to have the ceremony on Zoom as well.
Okay. So I'm guessing you guys were together, and then like on the other camera was the minister, something like that?
Yes. So long story short, it was difficult to get the paperwork to get a marriage that would be recognized internationally. So instead, I got a marriage that's recognized only within the territory of Colombia.
Okay.
Because during the pandemic, the British embassy was shut, and it was difficult to get certain paperwork. Just the short form of the story. So we submitted in our paperwork. The judge said, right, yes, we've got all the paperwork. You can get married. Do you want to get married tomorrow? And we thought, it's a bit fast. We only submitted the paperwork last night. Can you give us till the end of the week? So we quickly got some clothes, flew to Cartagena, logged in, and we were there in my in-laws' living room. And we got married there in the living room with the laptop connected to the television. So my in-laws were sitting on one side, my husband's grandmother, his sister, and his niece were on the other. And my family were on a tripod on my phone, and they were connecting in from Europe and the UK. And so they were there in their pajamas watching the ceremony. It was great. It was really lovely.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I think I saw some videos of people getting married like that. So yeah, you experienced a pandemic wedding. Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, good. Okay, well, we talked a lot about your husband. Let's move on to some other subjects now. People might be tired of all this romance talk.
Yeah, sorry.
But actually, I think lots of women follow me, and I think they like the chisme, the gossip. Okay, it's like gossip for them. You talked about culture shocks. So one of them, I can't remember the one culture shock you said. I think was the warmth. Yeah, but what are some other culture shocks, both positive and negative, when you were in Colombia? What were some of the other positive ones? Maybe some of the other negative ones from your experience?
I mean, there were quite a few. You've obviously mentioned the driving, the traffic. That for me is quite a big.
The honking and the chaos.
All of it really. In the UK, there's almost like a dance between the cars. So if you're driving slow, you stay in the slow lane. If you want to overtake, you go into the fast lane. There is a sort of dance between the cars, whereas here it's just sort of a descent of chaos, all the different lanes. But I'm sure everyone is familiar with that. I also used to make quite a lot of mistakes where I assume right of way in traffic. So I would walk into the road assuming right of way, and sort of my husband would pull me back and sort of go, no, you're going to get run over. Because in the UK, if you're, for example, on walking parallel to a main road, you can walk across a side street. Because you're walking parallel to the main road, you have right of way to traffic that's turning into a side road. So I would just keep walking, because no, the car's turning in, he's going to hit you. So getting used to the traffic was a bit of a culture shock. Also, because I was raised in the countryside in the Netherlands, it's very peaceful, it's very quiet.
Yeah, for sure.
Similarly, in the UK, even when I did my training contract, I lived in Newcastle. I lived right in the city centre, and even there, it was peaceful in comparison to Bogota and Cartagena, where the noise is constant. It's beautiful in some senses, because you hear people laughing, people celebrating, and partying. But for me, I sometimes need a moment of peace and tranquility, and that can be sometimes hard to find. If you're in your own home, I feel that sometimes silence would be wonderful, and you can't always get that. So that for me was an adjustment. But I would say those would be the main ones, really. I was surprised by the warmth and the welcome, surprised by the traffic, and surprised by the noise. As much as I love it, I mean, I do love music, but it can be a little bit much sometimes.
I don't know, for me, I have earplugs. I can't sleep very well if I don't have earplugs. Do you use earplugs when you sleep, or have you gotten used to it and you can sleep without earplugs?
I have noise cancelling earplugs that I put in at night. Yes, but it's odd to have to resort to that. I'm not used to it.
Yeah, it's funny. You'll see. I've seen some other gringos comments on it where they'll like take a picture of like a Latino baby in the middle of a party, and the Latino baby is just sleeping. And I just think I cannot sleep with all this noise. But yeah, Latinos, they have no problem sleeping with all the noise. And even if you talk to Latinos and you complain about the noise, they'll think, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, if you talk to a foreigner, like for example, last week I talked to the Dutch guy, the first thing he says, and Argentina is a pretty quiet Latino country, but even for him, he said, oh, these people they're so noisy. There's always noise, just always noise. So yeah, it's definitely a hard thing to get used to. Actually, maybe you should tell that story, because I remember the first time I met you at the coffee shop, you're talking about your neighbor, because you were living in Bogota with your husband for a little bit. For me, it was a very funny story. So tell everybody about the neighbor that would wake up in the morning and sing.
Yes. So I feel a bit embarrassed because I arrived, I think, grumpy to our like coffee meeting because I hadn't slept properly because of all the noise in my building. And so I'd lived in a building with 2 towers, and we were facing inwards in towards the second tower. And so I had a few noisy neighbors, but one in particular was in the tower in front on the 5th floor. And this person would open the windows in the morning and sit at the window and sing as if she were a Disney princess expecting birds to come to the window. And it would be sometimes at 7 o'clock in the morning or earlier. And if you wanted to sleep in, you couldn't, because you would just hear her doing her scales, her exercises, sometimes sing a line of a song repeatedly, repetitively. It was tough. It was a little tough because I'm not used to that. I think that's something that, for better or for worse, we do in the UK, and I think also in the Netherlands. We're very much worried about causing an inconvenience to others, and so we keep ourselves to ourselves. The downside of that is that it's difficult to sort of be accepted into that sort of community because everyone is very reserved and very private. But the benefit of that is that people don't inconvenience you. They don't, for example, ask awkward favors from you. They don't create a lot of noise. They don't, for example, park their car in a place that would block you, or leave their trash somewhere that you would trip over it. You're very conscious of your impact on others, and you're very much focused on not inconveniencing people around you. It's as bad manners if you do it. And that's something that has really been ingrained in me, and which is why I feel embarrassed if I talk too loud on the phone, or if I turn the volume up on the television. I'm always conscious, will the neighbors hear? Will I, is there a baby sleeping next door? Would I wake them? But that's, I suppose, maybe the European mentality. I don't know if it's the same in North America.
Canadians are the same. I always tell my students that I'm Canadian. So the first, like when I'm in public or in my apartment, the first thing I'm thinking about is there anything that I'm doing that is inconveniencing somebody else? If I'm walking on the street, I call it the Muralla Latina, where you have like 3 or 4 Latino friends, and they'll be walking on the street, and they'll be kind of like linked up a wall across the street, and they're walking kind of slow. So as a Canadian, if there's somebody behind me and they're walking a little bit faster, I'm going to just go to the side so they can pass. But with Latinos in general, 4 friends speaking, they're not going to get out of the way. They're going to stay in that Latino wall, and they're not going to let anybody pass. They can pass, but they have to walk onto the street, make a big loop, and then walk in front of them. So yeah, as a Canadian, and I think for British people, Swedish people, Norwegian people, I would say Northern Europeans, for us, I guess that Protestant mentality, I'm guessing that's where it comes from, is you don't inconvenience others. You make sure that others have their own private bubble. They can get to where they're going. They can do what they need to do. in privacy with quiet. So yeah, in Canada, it's exactly the same. And I would say it's definitely one of the hardest things to get used to in Latin America is how it just, yeah, it seems for us, it just seems a little bit impolite. So for example, in Colombia, and I think the other neighbor that you had when you were in the apartment building was playing reggaeton at strange hours of the day. So for me too, when I was in Bogota, I had one neighbor every morning at like 9 a.m, they were playing Bad Bunny in the shower. And I know all Latinos do this because there's tons of memes of Latinos saying, I can't shower without having reggaeton playing. So yeah, every morning through the walls, you would hear, mi tía me dice que tengo mucha novia. Yeah. And it's like, the song's very catchy, I agree, but at 9 a.m, I really don't want to hear it. I don't want to be hearing loud music. So yeah, just for Latinos, a different mentality for them. It's not about inconvenience. It's about, being happy in your own skin and expressing it to the world. I guess I'm still not completely sure about why they do it, but yeah, for us, we don't want to inconvenience others. So yeah, I completely agree.
But I've got to take the good with the bad, I feel, because I can't criticize too heavily the noisiness if that's one of the things that made me fall in Cartagena to begin with. When I first came, as I mentioned, it was just a sensory overload. And so to then later on sort of go, I don't like the sensory overload would be a bit hypocritical on my part. So I try and sort of remind myself, this is the reason you fell in love with this country. So even though it's different from home, it's different from what I'm used to, that's why I'm here, because it's different. And to go back to your muralla of Latinos, I know exactly what you mean. But I also try and remind myself, oh, look, there's a family there. Isn't that lovely? In the UK, it's very odd if you want to go out with friends, let's say to a cinema, to bring your younger siblings or a cousin or to meet up with aunts and uncles and share that time with your friends. We don't mix our groups. And so we don't have these beautiful sort of reunions and relationships that you get here. So even though it is peculiar to us to see huge groups of people walking down the street, it's also very beautiful because it wouldn't be very common in the UK, and I'm guessing also in Canada. No,
it would be very different for sure. It's even going to a nightclub in Latin America I would never invite my parents, I would never invite uncles, aunties, but you go to a nightclub in Latin America and it's like, who is this that you're with? Oh, this is my auntie. Oh, and this is my mother. It's like, you invited your mother to a nightclub? But yeah, Latinos will invite their entire family to a nightclub. That's very strange for our culture, for sure.
I would say one thing, I just remembered one other cultural qualm I have is tardiness. That's one thing that I haven't gotten used to. I'm getting better, but I think that's a big thing. And if to go back to relationship advice, if someone is looking to date a Westerner, I would try and be very strict with time, because it can be a real turn off if someone arrives extremely late. For me, at least, it's a sign of disrespect that you're saying your time is more valuable than mine. I'm supposed to wait for you. You think it's acceptable, whereas I would never do that to you. So it's a sign of disrespect if you arrive late. Late for me is 15 minutes.
And especially if they don't send a message, because that'll happen where they're late. And okay, it's fine to be late, but you need to tell the other person, hey, I'm stuck in traffic, or hey, something happened at home, I'm going to be a little bit late, just to let you know. And lots of times with Latinos, they won't even let you know. I completely agree. For us, it's going to come off as being disrespectful. Like you said, I always tell my students or people that follow me, British, American, Canadian, the Anglo-Saxon mentality is time is money. Time is valuable, so you got to value other people's time, or else basically it's like you're burning their money or you're burning their value. And it's very disrespectful if you do that, for sure. All right, now Virginia, so I asked people if they had some questions for you because you're British. So the one question, and there's so many videos about this on YouTube, and I even made a video about this on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure on Instagram, TikTok, there's tons of videos about this. But I just want you to give your own opinion about the differences between American and British English. Maybe before you start, I'll tell everybody watching this my own opinion. I don't have any problems with British English. Sometimes people will think that I don't like British English. My qualm, I like that word that you use, a very fancy word. My qualm with British English is just the British are very good at being culturally influential, just for hundreds of years. Well, even you can see that with the sports, right? Tennis, soccer, field hockey. The British are very, very good at convincing everybody else that what they do is the best in the world. And it's the same with British English. Even when I'm traveling around Latin America, the British have the British Council. They're very good at convincing Latinos, Asians, whoever it is, that British English is the proper English. It's the English you should learn because it's the best English in the world. So I would say congratulations to the British people. But as a Canadian, it's a little bit annoying because it's like, okay, I have no problems with British English. I like James Bond. I like Monty Python. I like Mr. Bean. I like many aspects of the British culture. But yeah, you're never going to convince me that British English is, better than Canadian or American English. But I'm not too sure. Let me start with that. You're British. Positive or negative, what is your perspective of American English? Do British people in general, do you view it as, ugly? Do you view it as different? Or you're just like, I don't really care. It's what they do over there. So whatever.
I think the snob in me might say that there is a big difference, and that it's called English because it comes from England. Or the way we do it is the best. That would be the snobbish side of me. But I think, generally speaking, as an English teacher, I think it doesn't matter which one the student wants to choose. The key of any type of language learning is to be able to communicate, express yourself, and going back to what we were discussing before, do something that you love. And so if you are someone who's trying to decide between English or American English, think about what is it that you want to do. Do you want to communicate with North Americans? Are you looking to start a life in North America? Do you like North American movies, TV shows, music? Study North American English. Yeah. If you're thinking about going to one of the Commonwealth countries, and I've got a question for you about that in a moment, but generally the Commonwealth countries, these are countries that recognize Queen as, King.
Yeah, the King now. Yeah, the King. Yeah,
I'm still going through a transition of mourning here. So the King as the head of state.
Yeah,
these countries are highly influenced by England, by Britain, and so they tend to use English spelling, English pronunciation, and so that would be Australia, New Zealand, I believe South Africa. If I can't remember correctly, England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. There are a long list of countries that are part of the Commonwealth, and Jamaica, Barbados. There are lots, and so they tend to be influenced by British English. So if you're interested in one of those countries, the culture of those countries, working there, then it makes more sense to study British English. For that reason, my understanding, because Canada is a Commonwealth state, do you accept both spellings and pronunciation? Or are you taught only one?
So in Canada, we learn British spelling, and the correct spelling in Canada is still British. But I think it's just been a slow process. Like I think 100 years ago, 150 years ago, we probably were more British. But slowly, just because of proximity, just because of the influence of the United States, I think we become more and more American. So there's a whole bunch of examples. For example, in Canada, we do use kilometers, but we prefer to use pounds when it comes to weight. We prefer to use feet and inches when it comes to measuring for buildings or for height, for example. Other example, spelling, of course, is British in the schools, but it's because of proximity, video games, sports, whatever. By the time you're an adult in Canada, you're starting to spell more like an American. What other examples? Again, culturally, I think, even 40 years ago, we probably watched more British television than maybe American television. Like Coronation Street, the soap operas in the UK. A lot of the grandfather generation, they watch that. Mr. Bean, Monty Python. Obviously, Monty Python's popular in all English speaking countries, but I think in Canada, it was especially popular because it's British. Even I lived in Vancouver and Victoria, and I know I worked at a hotel, a very fancy hotel in Vancouver. They had the British tea time, like the British do with the biscuits and the scones and everything. So a long time ago, very British, but nowadays it's becoming more and more American. And I wouldn't be surprised if right now or in a decade or 2 decades, Canadians are just going to forget about the British spelling and just start going completely towards American spelling. But I would just say it's a slow assimilation process, just closer. Obviously, Britain's very far away. So we're becoming more and more American. That's why I say I teach American English, because more or less Canadians speak American English. So yeah, that'd be my answer.
I think a lot of platforms as well that offer English language services tend to prefer American English as well. So a lot of the platforms that I work on, I am encouraged to use American English. Even though I'm British, I'm spelling most of the time in American spelling. And for those who are unsure what the difference is, typically British spelling takes the spelling from the language it originates. So we use a lot of French spelling, maybe Germanic words that came from the Nordic countries. We keep a lot of that spelling, Greek as well. As a result, it's difficult to read and write in British English because you have different pronunciation rules depending on where the word comes from, which language it comes from. Whereas the American one is more phonetic. They created their dictionary, their language, based on how the word sounds. And they did that after American independence to show their independence from England. And so they have a different spelling system as a result. So it's much easier, I feel, for Latinos to learn American English because it's similar to Spanish in that it's spelled generally how it's pronounced compared to British English, which is harder. I would also say that it's the same as if you ask a Spanish speaker which Spanish is the best Spanish. There's going to be a dispute, and there are also different accents. We've been talking a lot today about the different Colombian accents. The same with English. British English, there's no such thing as British English. There's so many different accents. I think I read somewhere it changes every 50 kilometers. Every city has its own regional dialect, and I'm sure the same for Canada. So there is no supreme way to pronounce a word in English. There's no supreme type of English or dialect of English. It just depends on what works best for you. Where do you plan to live? Who do you plan to communicate? And use that to decide which language you want to learn. I would also say the same with the different types of Spanish. You are understood. So if you use American English, you will be understood by a Brit, and a Brit would understand vice versa. I would say an American would understand British English by and large. There are some expressions, some cultural references that might get lost in translation, but as long as you are consistent with one type of the language, you're fine. Why do I say that? I say that if you're doing your IELTS exams, your TOEFL exams, if you start mixing British and American English spelling in your answers, it will be marked as spelling mistakes. So whichever one you choose, stick to that one. But we've talked about as well, not talked about here, but we've created content as well on Instagram about the pronunciation differences. So there's difference in pronunciation, spelling, as I just mentioned, and also grammar. British grammar tends to be a little bit more complex because we will use verb tenses like the perfect tenses that maybe in North America you may not. So in North America, the tendency is the past simple tense, whereas in the UK we might use present perfect, past perfect. But again, the objective of any language is to communicate. So if you decide to study American English, it doesn't mean that you would be understood in the UK. You would be understood even if you use a simplified grammar structure, simplified spelling, and a different pronunciation. You will be understood. That would be my answer to that question. I hope it's useful.
Yeah, well, I don't think we went into the details of differences, but again, for me, there's so many videos on YouTube that explain the differences, so just watch that. But yeah, that's my advice too, is for me, it doesn't make sense if you're Mexican, for example, and you plan on talking mostly to Americans, it makes zero sense to learn British English because you're going to be talking to Americans. Because I always get questions like, which English should I learn? I don't know. Well, it's pretty easy. If you're in Cartagena and all the tourists that you're going to be talking to are mostly Canadians and Americans, then to learn American English. But I don't know. Argentina, seems like British people like Argentina maybe more than Americans. So if you're in Argentina and you're going to be working in the tourism industry and most of the tourists are going to be British, then yeah, it makes more sense to learn British English. So just do whatever's going to work for you. And because I'm pretty sure for British people, it's the same. Because this is actually something that drives me a little bit crazy. On our television channels in Canada, I don't watch a lot of public TV anymore. But when I was back home for Christmas, I was watching the One News channel. And the news anchor was a British news anchor telling Canadian news. And as a Canadian, I guess a little bit just national pride, just I'm Canadian. I speak Canadian English, or I guess standard American English. Why do we have a British guy giving us the news? So yeah, for me, if there's a Latino that moves to Canada, for example, and they speak with a heavy British accent, I'm not going to discriminate against them, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, you're planning to live in Canada for a few years or the rest of your life, you're going to have to learn to speak Canadian English, just because that's what all my friends and family speak. And I would prefer, for my ears, I prefer to hear it. If I want to watch James Bond, of course, it's going to be in British English. But if you're living in my country, I'm going to prefer if you speak a more American English. So that's just my personal opinion about it. And I think the British would be the same thing, where they probably prefer to hear British English than American English if somebody's going to be going to the UK to live. That's what I think.
Yeah, it would just, whenever anyone asks me that question, I just flip it and say, if I were to ask you that same question about Spanish, what would be your answer? And most people would respond the same way that we have. It depends where you want to live. It depends what you want to do. Exactly. And that would guide your answer. And I would say the same thing.
Yeah, like if I'm a gringo going to Mexico, probably better to learn Mexican Spanish. Going to Colombia, learn Colombian Spanish, for sure. All right, the other question I got from somebody, for me, is kind of a funny question. I don't know if you're the best expert at this. I don't think you're the type of girl who is chugging back beers or anything. But somebody asked, why do the English like pubs so much? I do believe it's true. I've heard many stories that the English just are always going to pubs. So I guess best you can, if you can, explain the British pub culture and what it means to the subjects of the United Kingdom and the king of the United Kingdom.
So I love pubs. I'm not a big drinker, but I do love pubs. And the reason why is, I think, well, firstly, I think it's important to explain what a pub is. A pub is short for public house. And traditionally, these used to be taverns and sometimes inns. A tavern is a bit like a bar. A tavern is a place normally located like on a side of a road, so that when travelers or pilgrims were traveling down, they could get something to drink to help them as they moved along. And an inn is a place where you could get some food and sleep for the night, again, for travelers. Together, over time, they became known as pubs, public houses. And the common misconception is that pubs are like bars. You go there to drink and get rowdy, to get very sort of excited and a bit aggressive, and that's it. And it's not that at all. They're actually centers for the community. So you take your whole family with you to the pub. There is if you look at pictures of pubs, you'll often see like a line, a marker, which is dividing the part where the children can legally go and where you have to be over 16 to enter. And so, for example, with my family, we would go to our local pub called the Beefeater, and we would go there, and it was fantastic. You'd have a garden where you could run around and play in. You could have a Sunday roast, which is a typical dish that we have on Sundays in the UK, with roast potatoes, Yorkshire puddings, grilled veg, and some sort of protein. It might be a grilled chicken, something along those lines. And so we would eat that on a Sunday, and at least our local pub had a bouncy castle, so you could go and jump on the bouncy castle or go on the climbing frames. And it was just a great way to get the kids out. You'd see other families from your local neighborhood there. And so it was wonderful. There is a section which is just for adults, which is where you can go to order alcohol at the bar. and you
Okay.
can order beer, cocktails, things like that. People go there to watch the sports, and it's just a community meeting point. It's not solely about drinking, it's about coming together.
Okay.
And that's why we have a lot of activity around pubs. So people will go and play darts, they'll play snooker, they will play foosball. You have pub quizzes. I don't know if you have this in Canada, but
I think I know what you're talking about. I think we do have some, but probably not as much as you guys, but I do believe we have them. Yeah.
Yeah, and the pub quiz is essentially you go there in a group of your friends or your work colleagues. Often something that you do with work colleagues. You go to your local pub, you order food, you order drinks, you get a piece of paper, and there will be a quiz master, a person who has organized the quiz, who will ask questions. And together you fill in the quiz, you submit your answers, and then the one who gets the most number of points would get a prize, maybe a bottle of wine or something like that. And so it is very much about community. I'm actually quite surprised that there aren't as many pubs in Colombia, because I think it fits in with this idea of community, family. So it's not a bar, it's not for loud music. I know some pubs I visited here in Colombia and Bogota especially, it is about sort of drinking and loud music. It has lost the purpose of being
its
a
meaning.
pub. Yes, but if you go to the UK, you will very much see that it's a family place. It's often run by families as well. So that's would be my
basically
answer.
like the locally run businesses, more or less. Okay. So it's like a community center, just a place where people can come together. It's kind of a mixture between a restaurant, a bar, and a meeting point, more or less.
They have activities that you can participate in. You go there with your work colleagues, or you go there with your friends, watch a football game, or you go there with your families, with your grandchildren, just to run around and let them enjoy sort of the outdoor park. Because most pubs will have like a little garden that the kids can run around in. So yes, it's for everyone really. It's like I said, it's for the whole community. Sadly, they're dying out. The pandemic really affected the pubs. So a lot are closing down, but the love for the pub is because of that. It's the center point where people can meet and be sociable. In the UK, you don't stop people in the street and make conversation, but you can do that in the pub. It's the one place where it's sort of accepted to let down your guard and to be very open and talk to strangers. So that's why the pub is so important to us.
I think I have one more question about, it slipped from my mind. I guess the hours, like in a pub, is it open basically from like 8 a.m. until 1 a.m, or is it mostly like from lunchtime until 1 a.m? Or what are the hours generally for a pub in the UK?
It depends what type of pub it is. So you'll have some pubs which are almost like bistro pubs, where they are very much focused on the quality of their food. So they do British dishes to a very high standard. And these ones will be opened from sort of brunch time, so 11 o'clock, so that they can take in the lunchtime dinner customers for lunchtime and dinner. But you've got some that will be open maybe after lunch, and these are the ones that stay open till late at night. And these ones are more to do with sort of watching football events, having dinner, and maybe drinking till later into the evening.
Okay. All right, I got it. And I just had another question about that, but it also slipped my mind. Give me a few seconds. I think it was a good question. I think the last question I have about British culture. I like Colombia, but one thing that most gringos will say is that Colombians don't have the best food in Latin America. And sometimes when I say this, it really surprises the Colombians. I don't know why, but Colombians will always be like, "What? You don't think our food is the best in the world?" And I don't know who told you that Colombians have the best food in the world. Like, there are some things I like. For example, mote de queso from the coast. I really do enjoy it. Ajiaco. Colombians do pretty good soups, but there's a lot of food that's like bandeja paisa is the most famous one. And for me, actually bandeja paisa, for me, it looks pretty much like British English breakfast. So sometimes Colombians will get offended and they'll say, well, Canadian food isn't very exciting either, or British food isn't very exciting either. And I'll say, I completely agree. I never said that it was worse than Canadian or British food. Just compared to Mexican food, for example, or Peruvian food, it's not as good. But stereotype about British food is that British people have the worst food in the world. So I'm just wondering, defend yourself or agree with it. Do you think British food is good? Do you think it's bad? Is it more like I'm British, so I do like it, but I understand why other people in the world don't think it's the most exciting food in the world.
A good question. I mean, I recently traveled to the UK for Christmas and
Okay.
took my husband with me for the first time.
Yeah.
He's never been to the UK before, and I was worried about how he would respond to British food. And so I would say, based on his reaction, if it's done well, it's delicious. If you go somewhere, like anything really, I mean, originally I didn't like mote de queso because the first few times that I had it, it wasn't
made very good.
It wasn't made very well, and so that was my only reference point. So my conclusion was I don't like it, and then I tried it once, and it was fantastic. And now, no matter where I go, I like mote de queso, whether it's good or bad. I'll eat it. And I think that's the same with British food. If you go somewhere that does it well, you'll forever love it. And I also think because we're a very old country, saying England, but even in Britain, I should explain. Britain is Scotland, England,
Wales.
Exactly. We are the part that is one entire island. So Wales, England, and Scotland, we're Britain.
Okay.
Yes. And then United Kingdom includes Northern Ireland. So the island next to us, the northern part is Northern Ireland. The southern part is a republic. It's separate.
Yeah.
So when I say Britain, I mean that I'm.
Okay.
So Britain generally has a very old civilization, and there's a lot of history around our food. And I think if you learn the history of it as well, you'll get a better appreciation of, for example, that we eat bubble and squeak typically on a Monday because bubble and squeak uses the leftovers from the Sunday roast. Or, for example, that, you know, we have bangers and mash, supposedly bangers because the sausages used to explode when you cook them, and so they would bang. So things like that make the food a little bit more interesting and therefore more enjoyable. But sticky toffee pudding seems to be something that everyone loves. No matter where they eat it. Yes.
I'm going to look it up on Google. Maybe I've tried it, maybe I haven't. I'm not too sure. Yeah, because actually in Canada, I think it's just the influence. Obviously, Canada was a British colony. Same with the United States. But sometimes students will ask me the most typical Canadian meal for me, and I will always say a roast. But I think the roast is the same in Britain, the same in the United States. It's just something very from the British influence. Yeah. So for my family, roast is like a big hunk of beef. You cook it for 8 hours slowly. You have carrots, potatoes. And if it's a special occasion, you'll have some Yorkshire puddings. So yeah, we also have Yorkshire puddings in Canada. Even though not homemade, usually go to the store and you have like a little package and you just, you know, make the batter. But yeah, for me, I guess it's not really Canadian, it's more British, but for me, that's the most typical food that I ate as a kid and for me, my favorite food was the roast, I guess the classic British roast. Yeah, I like it.
I think something quite curious is the empanada, because we have something similar in the UK called a Cornish pasty. It looks just like an empanada. I'm probably going to upset people when I say this, but my understanding is that the empanada came from Britain. It came from the Cornish pasty. Controversial, I know.
Yeah.
But the reason it was created was for the miners. And so the miners would need a lunch that they could sort of keep in their pockets that was portable, and so the pastry on the outside kept the contents secure, and they would have a divider in the middle. So the Cornish pasty would be 2/3 meat with potatoes, swede, carrots, onions, and then there'd be like a little third at the top which might have jam in it, which would be the dessert, and it would have a little marker so you knew which end to start from, and so they could eat it and have like a full meal there. Nowadays you can buy Cornish pasty and it's entirely filled with meat. There's no dessert part to it, but the idea is that's what they could take to the mines. And then when the Brits traveled over to Argentina and started settling down there, they brought that tradition over to Argentina, which became the empanada, and then it sort of spread across Latin America.
Actually, I would say
my apologies, but this is what I was taught.
Oh yeah.
So it might be...
If Argentinians watch this, they might be Argentinians have a strange relationship with Britain. They love it and they hate it at the same time. It's very strange, the relationship. But yeah, I would say the empanadas here, for me, the best empanadas in Latin America are in Argentina. Yeah, maybe it's because they're the original. They're the ones that were most inspired by the British. What is it called? Yorkie pasty?
Cornish pasty. From Cornwall, from the western part of the UK. So,
all right, good.
But again, if I'm wrong with that story, my apologies. But this is what I was told many moons ago, that the origin was the Cornish pasty.
Okay, makes sense. All right. Well, I think those are all the questions I have. I think I want to end this though with what we call in Canada, United States, quick hitters about Colombia and Cartagena.
Okay.
So just quick answer. You don't have to go into deep explanations. Of course, if you want to give a bit of explanation, you can. So let's start. Your favorite Colombian food. Out of all the foods in Colombia, what's your favorite?
I would say it's a three-way tie between buñuelo, enyucado,
Really?
and
Buñuelo?
peto.
Okay. So buñuelo, what was the other one?
Enyucado. It's a
Oh,
cake here from the coast. It was my wedding cake. I loved it that much. Made from yuca, cheese, and aniseed.
I don't think I've ever tried it. Oh, I lived in Cartagena, but I don't think I've tried it. Okay. And what was the third one?
The third one, peto. Peto is another dish from the coast. It's made with corn. It's a bit like porridge, but instead of oats, they use corn instead. Delicious.
Yeah. Actually, I don't think I'm surprised. I never tried that either. But it sounds like corn porridge. Okay. Yeah. All right. Actually, what's your favorite British food? Like maybe what's the food that's when you're away from home that you really miss?
Oh, goodness. I love sweet foods. So I love Christmas cake, which is something that people love or hate because it's got the marzipan, the fruit sponge. It's delicious. You only get it that time of year. Mm-hmm. I also love Battenberg cake. Again, marzipan, but it's delicious. Those would be the top two for sweets. And for savory, I love bangers and mash. So that's my favorite.
I like the name, but I don't think I'm gonna have to look it up on Google afterwards. I always hear the name bangers and mash. I like the name, but I don't think I know what it is. I think mash is mashed potatoes, right?
Correct. Mashed potatoes. Bangers are British sausages. They are only deemed sausages in the UK. When we were part of Europe, they were not officially sausages because of the low content of meat. It has a lot of breadcrumbs, herbs, sometimes fruit. It's very delicious. And then it's often served with an onion gravy. So bangers and mash is always my favorite.
Okay, nice. Now, one of my favorite things about Colombia, I'm not a big fan of Colombian food, but I am a big fan of Colombian drinks. Colombians have amazing drinks. So they have coffee, juices. If you go to Cali, I don't think you've spent too much time there, but if you go there, they have really interesting like fruit salads and stuff. So I'm just curious, what's your favorite drink from Colombia? If it's a juice or if it's coffee, what's your favorite thing to drink?
Juice, hands down. Natural juices made with water. It could be lulo, could be guava, could be tamarind in English.
So you don't have it. You don't have a favorite. Just if it's juice, you love it.
If it's juice, I love it. But yeah, tamarind would be my top choice, even though it's not healthy. It would be my top choice.
Yeah, sometimes they put lots of like for maracuya is good, but the amount of sugar they put into maracuya to make it taste good, it's pretty impressive. And for somebody who doesn't know much about Colombia, one of the things that I loved is that a culture shock, I guess, is they have jugo and agua or jugo and leche. So for you prefer water juices, not milk juices.
I can't wrap my head around mixing fruit with milk.
I love it. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Zapote and leche, níspero and leche. I think so. And then mora and leche. Yeah, those are my favorites right there. Yeah. I wrap my head around it just fine. All right. What about for Britain? Is there a favorite drink that you have from the motherland, the mother country?
Tea, obviously. Obviously, tea.
I think the most typical is Earl Grey. Is that the most British one?
Well, we have something called breakfast tea, also known as builder's tea. And this is the dark, strong tea that everyone drinks. Earl Grey is a little fancy. That one has sort of floral notes to it. But yeah, I like we would say in English, the bog standard, meaning just the everyday, what everyone drinks, nothing fancy. Yeah, it's builder's like tea, breakfast tea.
Breakfast tea, yeah. Do you... Actually, I was a bit surprised. I went to Russia and I realized that they drink tea differently in other parts of the world. And Canada and the United States weren't much of a tea culture. And I remember in Russia, they would drink tea and then they would take a scoop of jam and then eat it. I don't know if British have strange customs like that. When you guys drink tea, is it just plain or is it with sugar? Do you have jam? What's the typical way of drinking tea for you?
It's a big discussion topic. So different people do it differently. So if it's just for myself in a mug, I would warm up the mug with some hot water, put the tea bag in, then put in fresh water to make the tea, let it brew for a few minutes, 3 to 5, add a splash of milk, no sugar. Sugar changes the taste. If you're going to make it for a group of people, you put it in a teapot. Again, you heat
Yeah.
the teapot with hot water, empty it out, put the tea bags in, one for each person, plus
Yeah.
one for the pot.
Uh-huh.
Let it brew with freshly added hot water. Put the tea cozy, which is like a pillow that you put on
Oh
top.
yeah, no, I've seen them. Yeah, I know. We do have it. Like the grandmas and the grandpas, they still got the tea cozies. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And let it brew for about 10 minutes, and then you add milk to the cup, and then add the tea on top. So there's a huge discussion in the UK if you should do milk first or tea first. If you're making a pot, I suggest you put the milk first into the cup. The
Is it warm? Is it cold milk or warm milk?
Cold milk.
Cold milk. Okay.
Yeah. And the tradition for that is to protect the china, because originally it was drunk in China, in bone china. And so if you added the tea first, it would stain the china. So you put the milk in, and then as you're pouring it, it mixes and gradually warms up the milk. If you make your tea first and add the milk afterwards, the milk gets shocked because it's cold milk and it suddenly hits the hot tea, and it can affect the taste of the milk. So if you have the time to make it in a pot, put the milk first in the cup.
No, I know. I did not know that.
Long answer, sorry.
No, it's very interesting. Yeah, tea is a lot more complicated in Britain and Canada. Canada just a cup, put a tea bag in it, hot water. Okay, drink it. It's very simple.
It's serious business.
Yeah. Now, Cartagena is a very popular tourist city. Do you have a favorite? I'm guessing it'd be the Ciudad Amurallada, but do you have a favorite part of Cartagena that you always take people, or that you like to go to?
That's a great question. Now, I think one of my favorite things to do in Cartagena is to walk around the walled city, either very early in the morning or at night when it's cooler, when it's not hot. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really like Getsemani. I think it's very beautiful, that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I normally like to take people around Getsemani so they can take a look at it. The beaches themselves aren't the greatest, but I think it's in Laguito or Castillo, they have a pedestrian park where you can sort of run or cycle, and it's very, very beautiful because you can really appreciate the skyline and the port, the water on that side, and it's very peaceful and quiet. So if you want to get away from the noise and the hustle and bustle, I love going there for a jog or for a run. So that's one of my favorite spots in Cartagena.
I know which spot you're talking about. Yeah, it's nice there. All right. Actually, I think I wanted to ask you one question about
almost any rooftop. Almost any rooftop in Cartagena. The Cartagena is so beautiful. If you're on a rooftop in a bar or a restaurant, it's always beautiful. So any rooftop in Cartagena, that would be the other thing.
Okay. All right. Nice. I think the last question just about Cartagena in general. You were there in 2015. I was there in 2015. And I know there's lots of gringos that don't recommend Cartagena anymore. And I'm just wondering, because you have a lot of experience there, do you think Cartagena has changed a lot in the last few years? Because it seems like with lots of other gringos that have been there before and then now, because it seems like the history of Cartagena, like 20 years ago, it was just very dirty, not well maintained. And then the government did something, and all of a sudden it became popular with both Colombians and foreigners. And nowadays it seems like a lot of foreigners complain because lots of scammers, lots of just if you go on the beach, for example, the woman with the massages and selling oysters that might make you sick. So yeah, a lot of gringos just say don't go to Cartagena. It's really bad right now. They're constantly trying to scam you. So I'm just curious, do you feel like Cartagena has changed at all, or do you think it's the same? What's your opinion about that?
I think in all the years I've been visiting Cartagena, it has changed over the past 7 years. I was quite worried for the city during the pandemic because it looked very neglected. The paint was sort of peeling off. Lots of businesses had shuttered meaning sort of closed down. And I was really worried about what would happen to the city. Now that I've moved back here, I'm over the moon. I'm really happy with a lot of the changes I'm seeing. A lot of new businesses have opened up.
Okay.
I can tell that they're investing money in the city for tourism. To give you an example, the rooftop of Mall Plaza was empty. I went there a few days ago, and they have created lots of restaurants, sitting area. They play live music, and they've converted it into a lovely place where families can go to enjoy a night out. And I can imagine lots of tourists enjoying that too. And you see that all over, that they're really taking advantage of what makes the city attractive and beautiful. And they're investing money to enhance that, to make it even more attractive. To go to the beach, for example, it used to flood quite often in the
Okay,
rainy
yeah.
period.
Yeah.
I've noticed that they're now constructing parts of the coastline to put up additional defenses to avoid flooding in the future. So I
Okay.
can really appreciate what they're doing. And with the beach, to talk to that issue specifically,
Yeah.
they are improving it. There are now, with the masseuses, there are women in uniform. They have a card with a set price list.
Okay,
Similarly,
yeah.
with the umbrellas and the sunbeds,
Yeah.
they now have like a set price list. You don't feel like you're being scammed. They
Okay.
are giving you the prices up front, and they're being
Mhm.
a lot more transparent, which I think is what
Okay.
tourists want. Tourists
Yeah.
don't want to feel scammed. If they say this is the price, here's the price list,
Mhm. Yeah.
we're fine to pay for it. But there's always that feeling in the back of the head of someone taking advantage of us because they think, oh, you're a foreigner, you must naturally be rich.
Yeah.
Whereas that's often not the case. I know when I came to
Mhm.
Cartagena, I had worked and saved money to come. And so for me, my money was precious. You know, I had that money for the time that I was there. But the assumption was, well, you can afford to pay more than everybody else. I'm happy to support industries. I'm happy to support businesses, but no one ever likes to be taken advantage of. And that can stop someone from going back. And that's the sad reality of that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is the guys that I do know that don't like Cartagena is just because they always feel like they're getting scammed. And I knew Spanish, and my Spanish is a lot better. So I knew more or less what the prices were for taxis and for everything. So I could avoid being scammed. But yeah, if you're new to the city, in the past, they would do everything in their power to scam you. But so it sounds like they are trying to professionalize, which is good because it'll definitely help Cartagena in the future. All right. Well, Virginia, we've been talking for 2 hours, maybe one of the longest interviews I've done.
I'm so sorry.
I think that, oh, no, it's not bad.
I've enjoyed it.
I've enjoyed it too. I learned a lot. Hopefully anybody watching this will enjoy it as well. If somebody's interested in learning more about you, I think the best way is your Instagram, or do you have somewhere else that?
Instagram is best. Yeah, best way to contact me. So that's at Aha Ingles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very costeño.
It is very costeño.
Actually, is it called Aha English for costeños, or is it more like the gringo Aha? Or is it kind of a mixture of both? It's like a double meaning name.
It was two. One, I wanted to pay homage to Cartagena and the coast because that's the reason why I came to Colombia and ultimately became an English teacher. And two, a nod to my past in psychology, the aha moment when things click and make sense. Yeah. So it's a mixture of the two.
So it's a mixture of the two. All right, makes sense. All right. Yeah. So if you want to get more information about Virginia, go to her Instagram page, Aha English. Virginia, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to me. And anybody watching this, if you have any questions, just leave them down below and I'll respond. So everybody, thanks for watching. Have a great day. And Virginia, we'll talk soon, okay?
Perfect. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye, Virginia.